Hello everyone, Mark here, Mark's Max Muscle. Today we are shifting gears just slightly to bring you guys a bit of a fun video. We are going to take a look at not the physiques today, but the posing trunks worn by professional bodybuilders. That's right guys, the little tiny posing trunks. This is a pretty standard pair of posing trunks worn by bodybuilders today. I mean, leaves not much to the imagination, a little bit of a G-string there, and some pretty sparkly colors, I must say. Pretty fancy. But in all seriousness, today we are taking a look at the evolution of the posing trunks worn by professional bodybuilders. And if we got to do that, we got to rewind way back. And I mean way back. This dude is Bobby Pandor, one of the first examples of I guess you could call a bodybuilder. They didn't compete back then, but I guess they used their physiques to their advantage to make money, things of that nature. But it was definitely the style to wear a leaf. It's plain to see. And here's a more famous guy from back. This was the turn of the century, guys. And these guys looked fantastic. Food for thought. But one thing they definitely had in common, their gear was even smaller than what they wear today. You take a closer look at Eugene Sandow, and it's funny. I'm a little bit surprised at this. It was actually just it looked like a cardboard or a paper cutout. So it wasn't a real leaf. Funny. The leaf actually was worn just for the photo shoots, to tell you the truth. Whenever Eugene Sandow would get up on stage in front of people, now keep in mind he never really competed, but he did what was known as flex display performances. When he did that, he would wear what you see here. Looks like some sort of animal skin, maybe a leopard, could be a jaguar, probably a jaguar, a South American cat, more than the leopards from the African regions. But anyway, from the side you can see it's a little bit of a high-waisted compared to today's bodybuilders, but from behind, the guy wore a pretty much a thong in the lower half, a little bit higher on in the back. But I mean, it's plain to see this guy was a precursor to the future. But like I said, he didn't compete. This was actually the first top three, which I did show in my history of bodybuilding. The top three of the very first ever bodybuilding competition. They wore basically just a loose pair of underwear. Anyway, there was other pictures of the lineups, and this was interesting. They wore a great big belt, or I don't know what it was, about 50 pounds of animal skin. And aside from the guy closest to the camera, they all wore full-legged pants. So not exactly what was going on here. Maybe they were just doing the upper bodies, and then they would put the shorts on them. Not exactly sure. Anyway, fast forward to the late 30s here. This is Burt Goodrich. I think he was the very first ever Mr. America, if I'm not mistaken, and they still had that leopard skin or jaguar skin. So little had changed in the evolution of the posing trunks up until, the early 1940s, and this was basically your standard bodybuilding posing trunks. High-waisted compared to nowadays, but, definitely more form-fitting than what you seen at the turn of the century. Here's a nice little lineup from I believe this is the late 40s. There was a lot of big names here, guys. Everybody wearing the light-colored trunks, except for one individual, Steve Reeves. He generally wore a dark color, but he wore a variety of different colors, and I guess that's what the black and white pictures don't really show. You can see there's blue, you can see red, obviously Steve Reeves here, and still some leopard skins, but I don't believe that it was an actual skin. I think it was just the print. You may take note there's Clarence Ross. He wore a very low-waisted posing trunks when you compare it to the very high-waisted what Steve Reeves is wearing. And that, I guess, was again a precursor to the future, but it didn't really stick around. As you can see here in 1950, it was still a high-waisted posing trunks game. You can see Reg Park wearing the white with Steve Reeves wearing I believe it's black, maybe even dark blue. Can't tell. Freddie Ortiz wore some pretty funky posing trunks. First one to really wear some flashy designs. Not only that, but he he was pretty much evolution in front of our eyes as far as the low set posing trunks, low on the hips. So this was more of a modern version of posing trunks. Now let's take a look at Bill Pearl. I mean, yeah, these trunks were very high-waisted for sure, but what he brought was a sparkle. You see that? And that's basically what they have today. This was fantastic, in my opinion, Bill Pearl's trunks. One of my favorite. He had the blue, but he also had these. They were a silver trunks, but I think he basically stuck with the blue for the most part. And it's funny. You can see pictures of none other than Dave Draper wearing the silver ones, and they're basically the exact same as Bill Pearl's. Maybe he gave them to him. Maybe he sold them to him. Hey, Dave Draper may have made him some wooden, shelves or some bed, wooden beds out of wood. You know what I'm saying? Dave Draper did that for other bodybuilders, and maybe Bill Pearl just give him his silver trunks. Either way, they definitely look like the same posing trunks to me. But you can see from the background there, it was not the norm, and not too many people did compete. Other than, I did see a couple of pictures of Boyer Co. wearing basically the same design. It was probably the same individual making those sparkly trunks. But it didn't really catch on, as you can see here. Bill Pearl still sporting those trunks, but Arnold Schwarzenegger, he kind of had, I guess you could call a nylon or maybe a polyester blend. Definitely new to the scene, but no, definitely not more fancy than what Bill Pearl had. Now, here is a lineup from 1970, guys. And Arnold had a very high-waisted posing trunks, for sure. I think those are blue, food for thought, that Dave Draper is wearing. Arnold switched to a much lower posing trunks, and this was basically what bodybuilders wore at the time. Arnold stuck with a kind of a boring old brown, and other bodybuilders stuck with red, such as Serge Nubret. Fantastic. He always wore red, and so did this gentleman here, Franco Columbu. And what he did when he won the title in 1976, he set a trend. A low-cut posing trunks. Do you notice that? And Frank Zane, of course, who carried on the Olympia title in the late 70s, he had a noticeably shorter cut set of posing trunks as well. Samir Banu, the 1983 Mr. Olympia champion, went slightly shorter in the front, you can see here, than Frank Zane. Of course, as far as the back of the trunks was concerned, the bottoms were still completely covered. Here's Josip Wilkosh. This is actually back in 1981. He was one of the first guys to wear really low cut trunks in the front. And if you think about it, this is exactly what they wear in men's classic physique today. And a little mini evolution of men's classic physique division. This is from 2020, which is basically what you see now. And this was from 2017. That's even higher than what Tom Platz had. So they have evolved as well as the men's open. This picture here definitely displays the evolution of at least the front of the posing trunks. You can see Al Beckles with the traditional, which was fashionable at the time, a little bit higher in the front. And Josip Wilkosh, like I said, he went a little bit lower than everybody else. And there is none other than Tony Pearson, the legend, the living legend himself, still competing. I believe he will still compete if he makes it to 100 years old. But anyway, on to the posing trunks. What he brought was actually pretty close to what they have today. Not only in the design, but those colors as well. Look at that. Fancy, fancy. But that was just the front. The back didn't really evolve until the mid-'80s. You can see Rich Gaspari, one of the first ones to, give himself a wedgie. So it wasn't really the design of the posing trunks from behind. He pretty much wanted to display his glutes. And food for thought, one of the first guys to have a set of striated glutes. But in my opinion, Tom Platz would more than likely have something to say about that. Of course, he kept his, in my opinion, very striated glutes covered up back here in 1981. Fast forward to the late 80s, and Lee Labrada was, in my opinion, in my estimation, the first guy to wear an actually designed trunks to show those glutes. Rich Gaspari really was just giving himself a wedgie. This was actually a very high cut set of trunks as far as the glutes. You can pretty much call them cheeky, I guess. And Dorian Yates, he continued on that cheeky trend. He wore pretty much the exact cut that Lee Labrada did a few years prior, but you can see there was no way that Lee Haney was going to switch over to the closer resembling a thong. Even though, food for thought, I definitely see some striated glutes there for Lee Haney. But anyway, he retired, and the next year, you could see guys not only following the trend of Dorian Yates, but Kevin Levrone went even shorter as far as the back of the trunks were concerned. Even a returning legend, Lou Ferrigno, switched over to the modern low-cut posing trunks, and this is pretty much evolution in front of our very eyes as far as the posing trunks are concerned. This is him from the mid-70s to the early 90s. What a difference! So with the fronts getting as skimpy as they were pretty much going to be, the backs got cheekier and cheekier, with Aaron Baker displaying pretty much the first real, what you could call a thong. I mean, I don't see any posing trunks whatsoever on the lower half, and compared to other guys, you definitely see why that he did want to display those glutes. I mean, if you compare condition with him and Thierry Pastel here, it's a no-brainer, guys. You can see that they definitely wanted to show that they were in condition. And in 1998, none other than Ronnie King Coleman definitely set a standard, and being a Mr. Olympia winner, he set the trend as well by going full-blown thong. I mean, there was no trunks in the back. If this guy walked out in the mid-70s with what he's wearing here in 1998, well, they wouldn't have let him out on stage. Of course, being this size, I wouldn't have been the one to want to try to stop him. Of course, this was more of a Ronnie Coleman thing, I guess. Other bodybuilders were doing it, but a lot of them, including Flex Wheeler, he was definitely sticking to his guns. He was not going to give himself a wedgie. So with the backs and the fronts getting pretty much as short as they were going to be, Ronnie King Coleman, I guess he upped the ante as far as the material that these trunks were made out of. In particular, here in 2003, I love these metallic trunks. He also wore some less than attractive designs after that. And then Jay Cutler, he basically rewound back to the 90s. He wore pretty much the exact same trunks that Dorian Yates wore. So I guess it hadn't evolved. Other than, there was velvet trunks. I took note, Dexter Jackson, he seemed to always wear velvet trunks. And then, like throughout the history of bodybuilding, the Mr. Olympia sets the trend, and Phil Heath pretty much wore exactly what Ronnie King Coleman wore. Little bit shorter, little bit skimpier in the front, but definitely no more cheeky from behind. And this trend continued on. You can see everybody else pretty much copied what Phil Heath has in the design, the cut, and everybody wore sparkles now. Even Dexter the Blade Jackson, he elected to stop wearing that velvet. In 2020, interestingly enough, Big Ramy, he wore an even shorter pair of posing trunks from behind. You can see here, compared to everybody else, definitely a little bit skimpier. And in my estimation, this may be a sign of things to come in the future. And the funny thing is, guys, this is basically reaching full circle here, because you look at Eugene Sandow, he was wearing nothing from behind. So as we are evolving, we're basically revolving back to the past. Now, the reason I say Big Ramy wearing these extra high-cut set of thongs is a sign of things to come is because here in 2021, the very next year, he pretty much wore what he was wearing the years prior. Not quite as, showy, I guess you could say, for the lack of a better term. Maybe the judges said something to him, but of course, winning the title, that That also says something. Anyway, I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. Like I said at the beginning, a little bit of a fun one. I actually did notice quite a few of you guys did request this one in the comment section of my history of bodybuilding video. So there you go. You guys wanted to see the evolution of posing trunks right there in front of our very eyes. Hit thumbs up on the video if you enjoyed it. It helps me greatly get the video out into the YouTube land. The more thumbs ups it gets, the more views it invariably will get. Have a great day.